Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sprint 203 review. This was a 4-week sprint due to the holiday break. So it is from, I believe, December 12th. I'll start with the overview, and then I'll follow up with the community announcement. Jeffrey on the UI, Adam on providers, Joe on the platform, and Keenan on the API. As you can see, Sprint 203, even with the extended length, was relatively normal. But there were a lot of enhancements. I believe there were some blast out scripts that we did, so that can contribute to the high numbers. On the community side, we released ManageIQ Oparin 1. The link there is the blog post, and I'd encourage you to take a look at it. It has a list of all of the features that we've added. And I'd really like to thank the community and thank all our developers for all the hard work that they put in for this release. Also want to announce that talk.manageiq.org was finally officially shut down. The credit card ran out, so they shut it down. And what we did instead was we built a new repository for talk.manageiq.org that automatically redirects to the Internet Archive version of the old forum. So this way, if there's any old links and old issues, hopefully they should all work by going to the Internet Archive. The link there is the repo if you want to take a look at how we did that magic redirecting. And over to Jeffrey with the UI.
Hi. In this sprint, 18 PRs got merged in the UI Classic repo, out of which 6 are bugs, 6 are enhancement, and 6 others. I can explain about them in the following slides. There was an issue in the physical storage page. That is, the form page was not being loaded when we click on the attach a new storage system button. The AutoST team fixed this issue. Next slide. We were not able to filter and sort the list in saved reports. That's because one of the parameters was missing in the form for the filtering request URL. Once the filter column keys are added back, the filtering and sorting is now possible. Next slide. Another issue regarding the reports was found out. The rows where the total values inside the reports was missing in chargeback rate reports. To fix this issue, we had to refactor and reuse some of the codes from the dashboard module. The old table designed the reports edit page, and the print preview was also converted in this PR. Next slide. When we are in the associating floating IPs with instance, we needed to click twice on the drop-down list to display the items in the select box. Melody refactored the code, and now we can see the select box items in a single click. Next slide. While trying to provision a VM, an error was displayed saying like no implicit conversion from hash into array. David identified the reason for this error and fixed them. Next slide. While scanning the dashboard page using the IBM equals accessibility checker, many violations were found. Most of them had been fixed. Remaining ones in the dashboard page can only be fixed after the table's conversion. Next slide. For the enhancement changes, the remaining provisional grid tables that uses the old table designs were converted to React data tables. By doing so, we removed 8 types of provisional grid items and integrated them into a single component. Next slide. In settings, diagnosis zone and server pages had an edit log depot form, which was converted from Angular to React. Next slide. And NASA made some changes in the ISO data store pages. The ISO data store will be modeled under storages with override infra manager ISO data store types. There are no major changes in the UI, but the create and edit operations for the ISO data stores was removed and will be handled by the providers. Next slide. Gilbert converted the summary pages under the settings diagnosis top level database tabs from HTML to React. Next slide. there was a discussion regarding the last refresh notification status for the cloud providers, and we changed its logics like if the status is error, no matter what the time, we display a red error notification. And if the status is success and the time is greater than 2 days, then it's stale and a warning is displayed. And if the status is success and the time is not less than 2 days, then we don't display any notification at all. Next slide. The AutoST team added a server profile template field in the service catalog item form. Next slide. For the other peers, Melody updated few packages to its latest stable versions like a Cypress, Webpack, Dev Server, Moment Time Zone, QS, and a Decode URI component. That's all from the UI side. Over to Adam.
Thank you. So for providers this sprint, Nasser completed the work to move the ISO data store model out of core and into overt. This is something which had been on our list for a while since it had some Rev specific logic and API calls that were in a core model, which really belong in the provider plugins. So he updated this to be subclassed off the storage model and did a data migration to convert existing ISO data stores over to the overt and the Rev subclasses. For Amazon, the bot updated the list of AWS instance types, and AutoSCE added an EMS refresh workflow to host groups so that when you create a new host group, we will kick off a targeted refresh automatically and wait for that to complete before doing anything else related to that creation. Next slide. The Cisco Intersight team, as Jeffrey mentioned, added service catalog support. So they added the catalog types and the default dialogues to the provider plugin. And Jason fixed a display issue where the Intersight provider name wasn't being capitalized properly. For IBM Cloud, Jay refactored how the Power VS VCR generation scripts are working so that they're more maintainable. And Nasser improved the IBM Cloud tag collection logic when we were hitting API rate limit timeouts. Instead of failing the refresh, we will now wait a bit and retry so that the refresh can succeed. The HMC team actually collected ISO media storages now that the models for the ISO data store are able to be subclass. They picked up on that core change and figured they'd add it, which is pretty cool. So now you can see your ISO storages for your HMC provider. Next slide. For OpenStack, we bumped the Cupid Proton library. The older version was no longer building properly on the GitHub Actions runners, and so we had to bump it to a newer version, which was fortuitous because we were going to try to do that anyway to move to CentOS Stream 9. So we're now on the latest version of Cupid Proton. For OpenShift, we updated the default port to match what is standard for version 4. Previously, we had the old V3 default port, which was 8443. And if you had a V4 OpenShift, you had to change it. But since we're going to be dropping V3 shortly, you now update the default port to match what current OpenShift versions use. So for Rev and Overt this sprint, the two PRs here move the ISO data store subclass into the providers so that they can be used. And they're actually now refreshed as part of the standard inventory collection, where previously you had to explicitly create one. And so now we'll pick them up automatically. So Nasser knocked both of those out, which is great. We fixed a bug in provisioning after the overt rev split, where find destination for the VM after it was cloned was looking for the wrong class. So for overt, it was looking for the rev class and wasn't finding it. So provisions were failing. So we changed that to look for the proper class name. And we also cleaned up a bunch of duplicate code that was copied as part of the overt rev split. We were erring on the side of caution of not breaking anything, but wanted to clean things up to remove some duplication. Next slide. And lastly, for VMware this sprint, Brandon dropped a bunch of old unsupported VMware versions from the VDDK, as well as added some newer ones for 7 and 8. And we also updated the RBVMO MyGem to pull in its vSphere 8 support. That is it for providers. Over to Joe.
Okay, as Adam just mentioned, Brandon updated the supported VDDK versions. Several contributors made improvements to Cube Client for continuous integration, the test suite, and a new release 4.11.0. Next, Brandon changed the 10 EL8 container Postgres to use the Postgres 1021 from the ManageIQ repository. Jason changed the copyright dates to 2000 to present to avoid having to continually update the current year with each new year. I added a GitHub Action PR to generate the English poem pop files on a schedule. From this change, the bot made its first scheduled PR to update the poem pop files, and some message typos were found and fixed from that. Next slide, please. For core bugs, Jason updated several tokens used by a few CI workflows, and Jason also made some changes to no longer push an unused RPM build image and to use the correct image tag for building RPMs. That's all for core. On to Keenan and the API.
Hello. So today we had 2 main enhancements. Nassar added the ability for the physical infrastructure collections to actually support custom actions. So that was across a couple of those. And also in the physical storage, the family's resource and services, GAL added those API endpoints. I think that's the first commit that I've seen from GAL. So thank you very much. Adam fixed up the test suite for some issues around custom attributes and date matching. Okay, next slide for the rest.
All right, and that's the end of our Sprint 203 review. The next review, Sprint 204, will be on January 25th at the normal place and time. And again, I'd like to thank everyone in the community. Thank you for the Oparin 1 release that you've all contributed to. And check out the release. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great day.